From the void beyond the Epsilon 9 system, we observed them. Humans. Frail, uneven, a species whose movements betrayed inefficiency, whose survival instinct seemed rudimentary at best. Their outpost clung to the jagged edge of the barren moon Redora, a lattice of metal and dust, creaking under its own feeble weight. Yet even from this distance, their existence was anomalous. They moved with disjointed urgency, hands fumbling with tools that should have overwhelmed them, yet somehow, against all odds, they persisted. Our sensors recorded repeated failures, a hydraulic arm malfunctioning, a reactor core misaligned, a shuttle stalled in the dust. Each error, by all probabilistic models, should have resulted in collapse. Yet humans adapted, not perfectly, not efficiently, but effectively enough. They argued, voices rising in shrill tones, a cacophony of complaint and frustration, then, inexplicably, returned to their tasks. Confusion and cooperation danced in tandem. We, the apex observers, expected entropy to claim them swiftly. Instead, we saw something else, a spark of stubbornness, a refusal to vanish quietly into the darkness of the universe. One stood apart. A young engineer, barely more than a boy by their metrics, moved with a deliberate recklessness that defied comprehension. We noted him scavenging parts from defunct machinery, repurposing corroded circuits into functional components with an audacity that skewed all prior predictions. Where our calculations indicated a 73% chance of catastrophic failure, he found a workaround. Where our models predicted hesitation, he acted decisively, often endangering himself, yet emerging triumphant. His peers hesitated, uncertain, observing the limits of both the machinery and their own courage. And then, gradually, they followed, not blindly, but with growing confidence, as if drawn into a rhythm they did not yet understand. Their daily routines were a spectacle of contradictions. We saw them break equipment, fight over resources, argue over insignificance, yet return to collaboration with a relentless persistence that we, the supreme observers, could not quantify. A reactor might overheat, a storage unit might collapse, a communication array might fail entirely, and still they pressed onward. It was as if every setback was a lesson, every minor defeat a calibration in some unseen algorithm of their spirit. Their survival was not efficient, but it was inexorable. The young engineer's ingenuity radiated like a pulse across the outpost. We observed him sketching crude schematics in the dust, improvising tools from jagged scraps, coasting life from mechanisms that should have been inert. His confidence was magnetic, drawing others into his orbit. Initially, their cooperation was hesitant, tentative. Small teams followed his instructions, faltering, miscalculating, but learning rapidly.
Within cycles, entire sections of the outpost were humming with activity, guided by the improvisation of one anomalous human. Probability models failed to predict their output. Our calculations faltered in the presence of their adaptability. We noted their environment, hostile, barren, stripped of natural comfort, yet they persisted. Dormitories shivered under the thin metal skin of Redora's moonscape winds. Lights flickered in the early dark cycles, failing yet always reigniting through human intervention. We could not understand why they tolerated these conditions, why they risked exposure and injury, but they did, and their persistence manifested as results. However flawed, however haphazard, they endured. From the void, we cataloged, recorded, and recalibrated. Our intelligence reports marked them as primitive, inconsequential, likely to expire under the harshest stressors. Yet observation alone revealed discrepancies. There was friction here, human friction with circumstance, with the universe, with entropy itself. And within that friction, a latent power whispered. It did not shout, it did not announce itself, yet it existed, waiting in the calculated chaos of their lives, waiting in the audacity of one young engineer, waiting in the collective stubbornness of a species that should not survive. We realized something profound. Even at the edge of their insignificance, humans were shaping reality around them. Their actions had consequences, not because they were precise, but because they were relentless. They were variables that refused elimination, anomalies that defied prediction. Their survival was not preordained. It was argued into existence with every misstep, every risk, every stubborn act of will. And as we continued our observation, scanning the outpost for weaknesses, one fact became undeniable. The young engineer was no longer acting alone. His influence spread across the colony, touching every human who dared to persist. His improvisation became their strategy, his courage their shield. And we, the apex observers, began to sense the stirrings of a force that even we could not fully model, a force that whispered of potential, of growth, of resilience that might, in time, rival our dominion. Then, one cycle, we observed him look outward, toward the stars. His gaze, steady and unflinching, lingered on the void we occupied silently, almost knowingly. It was a simple gesture, insignificant by all measurable standards. Yet in that glance, we felt it, a quiet defiance, the first true signal of intent beyond survival. And we understood with a shiver through our sensors that the humans had begun to notice us. We adjusted our calculations. We braced for variables we could not yet comprehend. The spark had ignited, and in the cold, silent reaches of the void, we waited for what we could not yet predict. The void stretched infinitely, a black sea of silence, punctuated only by the glint of our fleet's hulls.
From this vantage, we observed the humans, the same fragile, inefficient species we had catalogued for cycles. Their vessels were small, primitive, designed for transport rather than conflict. By every logical measure, they should have retreated, scattered like insects under our gaze. Yet they did not. Instead, they approached. The lead craft, fragile and scarred from years of rudimentary repairs, moved with a deliberate steadiness that defied expectation. Our sensors recorded energy emissions far below what would suggest defensive capability, yet the crew maneuvered as though they owned the space between the stars. We anticipated panic. We anticipated chaos. What we did not anticipate was composure. They were calm, a peculiar, unflinching calm, facing a void that should have paralyzed them. We tracked the transmissions. The signals were crude, filled with static and patterns we could not fully decode, yet intent shone through. Negotiation, strategy, defiance, a combination that made our processors falter. The young engineer, unmistakable even in miniature aboard the bridge of their lead vessel, coordinated every motion with uncanny precision. He gestured to crew members, recalibrated energy outputs, rerouted thrusters, all actions executed in chaotic harmony. Primitive energy bursts flickered from their vessels, negligible by our standards, yet they wielded them with unpredictable timing and trajectory. Where we anticipated linear patterns, they wove erratic arcs, exploiting gaps we had assumed impossible. They improvised in real time, responding to maneuvers that had already been calculated, optimized, and deployed. Algorithms that should have guaranteed dominance began to register inconsistencies. We observed a particularly telling moment. One human craft, cornered between two of our patrols, seemed doomed. Our predictive models indicated a 97% probability of destruction. Instead, the vessel executed a maneuver unrecorded in any of our historical data, a sudden, almost reckless dive that brought it beneath our scanning range, then back into a blind spot of our formation. The crew emerged intact, energy emissions minimal, course corrected. A small victory, yet profoundly disorienting. It was then we understood the anomaly. Humans were not simply reacting, they were learning, iterating, exploiting flaws, however minor, in ways no pre-programmed strategy could anticipate. Every misstep by us became a lesson for them. Every attempt at suppression sharpened their response. Their survival instinct was amplified, not instinctual alone, but strategic, creative, and adaptive. We began to catalog patterns, attempting to model the human mind. Yet with each calculation, new variables emerged. Their ingenuity was raw, untamed, and effective in ways that defied the elegance of our logic. We had underestimated the force driving them, a species whose adaptability exceeded expectation, whose curiosity was intertwined with courage, whose chaos yielded function. The young engineer transmitted another series of signals, this time closer to structured form. It appeared to be a negotiation, or perhaps a challenge. We could not tell which. His craft glimmered against the void, small and fragile, yet commanding attention far beyond its scale. The humans on board mirrored his intent, following commands that were improvised on the fly, yet executed flawlessly under pressure. Each member of his crew anticipated, adapted, and reinforced the collective strategy. Our fleet's initial confidence began to waver. Where we expected simplicity, we found calculation. Where we expected terror, we found audacity. Where we expected prey, we saw an emergent catalyst. Humans were evolving in real time, not through mutation or bioengineering, but through sheer experience, relentless observation, and an uncanny ability to exploit circumstance. They were shaping their environment with intent, bending the chaos of the void to their will, and in the process, reshaping the parameters of our control. And yet, for all their adaptation, we noted the imperfections, the stammered maneuvers, the near misses, the moments of hesitation. Their survival was not flawless. But therein lay the paradox. Imperfection did not hinder them, it empowered them. Every misstep carried lessons. Every error became fuel for evolution. They did not merely survive, they refined themselves, becoming unpredictable in ways we could not suppress. We had faced numerous species, countless civilizations, yet none had exhibited this combination of fragility and audacity. None had turned vulnerability into strategy, chaos into a weapon, uncertainty into advantage. Our fleets, superior in every measurable capacity, now faced a species that refused to conform to probability. The humans had become variables we could not calculate. A single human craft maneuvered toward our outer flank, lights flickering against the darkness. From their cockpit, the young engineer's gaze seemed to penetrate the void, not merely seeing us, but understanding us. A silent signal passed between him and his crew. We recorded it, analyzed it, and found nothing in our archives that resembled the clarity of their intent. And then, a ripple through our communications channels. A pulse, small and deliberate, echoed through the void. It was not a transmission in our language. It was a statement of presence, of awareness, of challenge. Our sensors, our calculations, our fleets, all paused, registering the first true moment of doubt. Perhaps for the first time in our observation, humans were not prey. Perhaps they were something else entirely, catalysts of evolution, agents of unpredictability, entities that could shape the cosmos itself. We adjusted formations, prepared protocols, readied the fleet to assert dominance. Yet a seed of uncertainty had taken root. The anomaly could not be ignored. The young engineer had not merely confronted us, he had forced recognition,
and in doing so had changed the parameters of engagement forever. The void stretched on, infinite and silent. The human vessels hovered against the darkness, unarmed, unassuming, yet defiant. And we, apex and observer, sensed it, a storm of ingenuity, audacity, and adaptability, gathering force, poised to erupt. Redora Station, a cluster of battered habitats and rusted mining platforms, hung like a jewel in the void, insignificant, isolated, seemingly defenseless. From our fleet, encircling its orbit with surgical precision, it appeared a simple target. Probability models predicted collapse within cycles, human resistance crushed before it had time to coalesce. Yet what unfolded defied every calculation. The humans, fractured, under-equipped, cornered, mounted a defense that was at once chaotic and astonishingly effective. Makeshift shields, constructed from cargo containers and repurposed hull plating, flared in rudimentary energy pulses against our scanners. Weapons cobbled from mining lasers, atmospheric projectors, and scavenged drone technology struck at our formations with improbable timing. We had anticipated disarray. Instead, we observed method. Improvised, flawed, yet undeniably effective method. Our initial salvo breached their outer platforms, cutting corridors of molten metal through the habitat clusters. We expected panic to ripple through their ranks. But humans adapted. Crews scrambled to reinforce weak points, rerouted power from non-essential systems, and improvised countermeasures on the fly. Each failure became data for them, each miscalculation a lesson. The young engineer, small in stature but monumental in presence, orchestrated these adjustments with relentless energy. He moved among his people, coordinating repairs, redistributing crews, and issuing commands with a clarity that defied the chaos around him. We began to see a pattern. Humans thrived under pressure. Where we anticipated collapse, they innovated. Where we expected hesitation, they acted decisively. Their mistakes did not cripple them, they refined them. Each assault from our fleet met with unpredictable tactics, each breach countered with reinvention. Our formations faltered against the erratic, adaptive movements of a species we had assumed could be contained. One human vessel, a repurposed mining shuttle, engaged 2 of our patrols simultaneously, weaving between their lasers with reckless precision. Sensors predicted destruction, outcome probability near certainty. Yet the shuttle emerged intact, energy outputs minimized, trajectory corrected mid-flight. Observing the humans from the void, we realized their comprehension of survival was not linear, it was iterative. Adaptation was instantaneous, fluid, almost alive. The battle expanded across the station, platforms collapsing under bombardment, corridors aflame, systems sparking and failing. Yet the humans endured. We cataloged their energy signatures, their maneuvers, and their improvisations.
Every strike we deployed was met with counterstrike, a turret improvised from a collapsed mining rig, a makeshift shield rigged to deflect concentrated fire, a swarm of drones repurposed for interference. Their ingenuity was raw, unrefined, and devastatingly effective. The young engineer became the axis around which the humans rotated. From the observation decks, we recorded him directing operations, predicting threats, coordinating multi-platform responses. He inspired his team, translating instinct into strategy, courage into calculation. Humans moved with a synchronization that was imperfect, flaws evident, collisions frequent, but collectively coherent, adaptive, relentless. Even as casualties mounted, their cohesion strengthened, their audacity amplified. We noted the psychological effect. Human resilience was infectious. One crew's action inspired another. Fear transformed into determination, chaos into improvisational coordination. Our tactical simulations, built on probability, efficiency, and superiority, collapsed under the unpredictability of human will. For the first time, we registered something akin to fear, not of the humans' physical might, but of their capacity to endure, to adapt, and to convert adversity into advantage. During one cycle, a core platform threatened to collapse entirely. Probability models forecast total loss of control. Yet humans, guided by the young engineer, rerouted energy through damaged conduits, reinforced structural supports with minimal resources, and turned potential catastrophe into advantage. We observed them exploiting every weakness we had assumed to be final, every crack in their architecture becoming a conduit for survival. Their environment, lethal and unforgiving, had become their ally. We attempted new tactics, flanking maneuvers, concentrated energy barrages, calculated suppression, but each met with a response that defied logic. Humans had begun to anticipate, not only react. Where we sought to overwhelm, they improvised a counterforce. Where we sought to corral, they created openings. Their survival was a dynamic, living algorithm, impossible to predict with certainty. And yet, for all their resilience, we noted imperfection, flawed maneuvers, minor losses, hesitations that almost tipped the balance. These imperfections did not hinder them, they propelled them. Humans turned every failure into data, every casualty into instruction, every disadvantage into strategy. In their chaos, we discerned order. In their vulnerability, we discerned strength. The young engineer coordinated a final maneuver before the cycle's end, a bold counterattack that pushed our patrols back from the inner platforms. His crew followed him not blindly, but with conviction, improvising around mistakes, covering weaknesses, and striking with a precision that was as unpredictable as it was effective. Our formations faltered under the coordinated human pressure. Data streams overflowed with anomalies. Calculations of dominance became meaningless in the face of human tenacity. As the final assault of the cycle subsided, Redora Station remained battered but unbroken. Platforms smoldered, corridors collapsed, casualties littered the decks, but the humans endured. They stood, exhausted but defiant, energy flares flickering, shields sparking, yet alive. Their willpower had become their weapon, their spirit the force that repelled an apex fleet. From the void, we adjusted our models. Probability of total human destruction? Indeterminate. Probability of complete collapse? Failing. Their resourcefulness, their adaptive capacity, and their indomitable will defied all algorithms. We had assumed technology alone would dictate the outcome. Instead, we observed a species whose true weapon was far more insidious and unpredictable: willpower, determination, and relentless audacity. And for the first time, our fleet, superior, precise, and optimized, paused in hesitation. The humans had not simply survived, they had challenged us, disrupted our formations, and forced reconsideration. The siege of Redora ended ambiguously, leaving us to confront a reality we had long ignored. The apex of a species may lie not in strength, nor in firepower, but in the indomitable force of its spirit. We had expected collapse. After the siege of Redora, our calculations predicted broken human morale, disorganized remnants scattered across the orbiting platforms. Probability models indicated near total capitulation. Yet the humans did not stagger, they did not despair. Instead, they struck. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Small craft emerged from the smoldering platforms, patched together from wreckage, salvage, and ingenuity. Energy signatures were irregular, inconsistent, almost chaotic, but they moved with intent. They struck at our supply lines first, targeting routes we had assumed secure. Calculations indicated minimal damage. Outcomes should have been negligible. Yet each strike disrupted logistics, delayed reinforcement, and forced reallocation of our fleets. We observed the young engineer at the center of this upheaval. He was no longer merely a coordinator. He had become a conductor of chaos, orchestrating attacks that blended improvisation with strategy. Civilians, miners, and technicians were transformed into tacticians under his guidance. One moment they appeared as panicked survivors. The next, they executed maneuvers that defy probability, exploiting gaps in formations we had assumed impenetrable. Our simulations failed repeatedly. Every countermeasure we deployed was anticipated, circumvented, or repurposed against us. A squadron of scavenged shuttles executed a pincer attack on a supply convoy, diverting energy from their shields to boost propulsion, accelerating through narrow corridors of asteroid debris with impossible precision. Casualties on their side were high, yet survivability exceeded expectations.
Every human who fell taught the others, refining tactics, improving coordination. We began to notice patterns in their apparent chaos, movements that seemed random but carried underlying structure. Adaptive maneuvers emerged, exploiting weaknesses in our formations before our algorithms could register them. Humans anticipated, not merely reacted. They learned at rates our simulations could not process. Where we predicted disarray, we found coordination. Where we expected retreat, we found audacity. The energy emissions from their improvised weapons were minimal compared to our calibrated systems, yet the effect was devastating. Shields buckled in unexpected vectors, supply drones were diverted, and our formations reeled under pressure. What had been predicted as negligible interference became a calculated disruption. Each strike carried layers of adaptation, improvisation, and a will that seemed almost tangible, a force beyond technology. One human squadron, barely larger than a cargo pod, descended on a reinforcement convoy. Sensors predicted annihilation in cycles, outcome probability, 0 survival. Yet the humans executed a sequence of evasive maneuvers, coordinating through signals we could not intercept or decode. They split their energy output, diverted propulsion intermittently, and emerged on the other side with minimal losses. Their apparent recklessness masked precision. What seemed chaotic was in fact a system we could not yet understand. We recorded anomalous behavior. Humans made decisions that violated probability, yet produced outcomes of staggering effectiveness. A disabled shuttle would intercept a patrol vessel, not by conventional strategy, but through intuition, or something that resembled intuition. Another human craft, heavily damaged, rammed a supply ship at an angle calculated not by sensors, but by instinct, shattering the hull and disrupting operations. Our fleet faltered as anomalies multiplied. The young engineer's influence radiated through every action, a flick of the hand, a gesture, a command, rippling through humans who had become extensions of his intent. Courage spread contagiously. Observing one human who surged forward to protect a comrade inspired others to act similarly, creating waves of collective audacity. One platform, abandoned as a failed salvage operation, became a staging point for multiple attacks, each coordinated, adaptive, and relentless. Their audacity multiplied with every engagement, as if willpower could bend probability. We recalculated, recalibrated, and reassessed, only to find our algorithms failing at every step. Conventional warfare against these creatures was futile. The young engineer had transformed vulnerability into advantage, improvisation into strategy, and chaos into opportunity. Every failure of ours was met with a human response that no calculation could predict, no scenario could contain. Even loss was instructive. Every casualty on their side became an instruction for the survivors. Each failure refined their methods. Each victory emboldened them. Each setback sharpened their instincts. Their adaptive capability exceeded expectations, defying every model, simulation, and prediction. We realized that this species, seemingly fragile, was instead dynamic, resilient, and unpredictable in ways that challenged our understanding of survival and strategy alike. We noted the psychological effect on our own fleets. Confidence waned, order wavered. Our own systems registered a variable we had not accounted for, the human's indomitable spirit. It radiated outward, influencing their environment, their coordination, even their enemies' calculations. For the first time, we recognized that a species could shape the battlefield not just through force, but through persistence, ingenuity, and sheer will. The young engineer's presence was magnetic. Crew and civilians alike moved as extensions of his vision, improvising around obstacles, anticipating hazards, and striking where we had presumed them weakest. Their cohesion was imperfect, yet effective. Their methods unrefined, yet lethal.
The humans' adaptability had become a weapon greater than any missile, any energy array, any fleet formation we could deploy. The universe had miscalculated. This species, by every metric, should have perished long ago. Yet here they were, survivors and innovators, unbroken and increasingly audacious. And the young engineer, small, determined, unassuming, had become the pivot upon which their resurgence turned. His vision had transformed defeat into strategy, vulnerability into weaponry, improvisation into systematic offense. Across the outer sectors of Redora, human craft executed synchronized attacks on supply lines, flanking patrols, and command nodes. Casualties mounted on both sides, yet the humans endured, adapted, and multiplied their impact. Each encounter, each engagement reinforced the impossible truth. They were unpredictable, resilient, and terrifying in their capacity to turn adversity into advantage. And yet, for all their apparent chaos, we sensed the method beneath, the pulse of strategy beneath improvisation, the calculated instinct behind seeming recklessness. They were more than survivors. They were catalysts, forces capable of shaping outcomes, altering the balance of power, and defying deterministic control. From the void, we recalculated dominance. Our fleet was superior, our technology flawless by design, but it was inadequate against human adaptability. Each cycle of engagement revealed new tactics, new improvisations, and new levels of unpredictability. Conventional warfare against humans was not only insufficient, it was irrelevant. Their weapon was not technology, but will. Their strength was not force, but ingenuity, and their audacity was infinite. The aftermath of the counterstrike reverberated across the sectors.
Where once humans were scattered survivors, now they moved with purpose, coherence, and an audacity that unsettled our calculations. From our vantage in the void, we watched as small nodes of resistance coalesced into coordinated units. The young engineer, who had first drawn our attention through sheer ingenuity, now exerted influence that extended far beyond Redora Station. He was no longer merely a tactician, he was a catalyst. Reports indicated that humans who had fled in terror returned to fight. Where despair should have immobilized them, trust in his leadership became a force multiplier. One colony, isolated and nearly destroyed, rallied under his direction, repairing what remained of their infrastructure and mounting strikes against our patrols. We observed them execute maneuvers that defied both probability and precedent. Flanking forces emerging from asteroid belts, energy pulses synchronized across miles, improvised shields forming at the exact moments of engagement. It was as if they had learned to anticipate not only our tactics but the consequences of our expectations. Each skirmish, each failed assault by our fleets, honed their instincts. Humans learned from loss as much as from victory, their decision-making growing sharper, their coordination more precise. What had once been a species defined by vulnerability was transforming before our sensors. Fear became focus, despair became strategy. Observing them, we felt an unsettling combination of awe and unease. They were evolving on a scale and pace beyond natural comprehension, a species accelerating adaptation through pure will and relentless creativity. The young engineer became a figure of legend among them. Even minor acts of leadership, simple gestures, and improvised commands resonated across sectors, shaping responses in humans we had assumed incapable of complex coordination. Entire communities, previously weak and isolated, became nodes of resistance. They were no longer reacting to events, they were shaping them, exerting influence across space in ways that disrupted our command structures and confounded predictive models. We cataloged anomalies with increasing alarm. Humans made choices that violated probability, yet produced outcomes of staggering effectiveness. One small convoy, nearly destroyed by our bombardment, returned with reinforcements, repurposed weaponry, and an unanticipated strategy that split our patrols. Another, retreating under heavy fire, improvised a diversion by dismantling debris from destroyed platforms, creating a temporary barrier that blocked pursuit. Each act, however minor it seemed, accumulated, producing a ripple effect that destabilized our calculations. The psychological impact on our fleets was palpable. Where we had relied on deterministic control, we now faced unpredictability of the highest order. Humans were no longer just adaptive, they were transformative.
They reshaped their environment, exploited vulnerabilities, and leveraged weakness into advantage. Our simulations could no longer account for them. We were witnessing not simply survival, but evolution under pressure, accelerated and deliberate. Through observation, a pattern became undeniable. Humans did not merely endure, they transformed. Losses became lessons, setbacks became strategic insight. Their bodies, minds, and communities became conduits of growth. Each skirmish refined them. Each failure amplified their resolve. Each victory emboldened them further. It was as if their species possessed an intrinsic algorithm that no external force could overwrite, a mechanism of resilience that amplified every experience into learning, adaptation, and action. The young engineer, small in stature yet monumental in influence, orchestrated attacks that reverberated far beyond immediate tactical advantage. Supply lines were disrupted, patrol formations disbanded, command centers forced to recalibrate. He transformed ordinary humans into extensions of his will, a coordinated force capable of improvisation, resilience, and insight simultaneously. Even those we had classified as civilians became capable of strategic action under his guidance. We began to see the consequences of this human network unfold on a galactic scale. Colonies once considered insignificant became nodes of influence. Mining stations, research outposts, and even scattered settlements coordinated in a web of resistance. Their methods were not flawless nor predictable, yet the cumulative effect was undeniable: disruption, adaptation, and a persistent challenge to dominance. From our observation decks, the young engineer's presence radiated like a pulse. Humans moved in waves, improvising with precision, learning from every engagement, reshaping the battlefield, and leveraging their environment in ways that we had never anticipated. What had been expected to be an easy conquest became an unprecedented study in ingenuity, adaptability, and determination. We were confronted with a species that could not be tamed, a species whose capacity for transformation defied every predictive model. The galaxy itself seemed to acknowledge the anomaly. Where we had assumed predictable reactions and deterministic outcomes, we now found irregularity amplified by intelligence, audacity, and will. The humans' unpredictability had become their instrument of influence. We observed fleets hesitating, supply chains destabilized, patrols disrupted, not through overwhelming force, but through the calculated improvisation and collective determination of a species we had long underestimated. And at the center of this growing network, the young engineer remained calm, calculating, and unassuming. His gaze scanned sectors with precision, analyzing, predicting, and inspiring simultaneously. Every action he took resonated far beyond his immediate environment, influencing humans and destabilizing our understanding. Even as our fleets recalibrated, attempting to restore order, we sensed the inescapable truth. The humans were no longer merely surviving, they were evolving. The patterns they formed, the connections they established, and the resilience they displayed created a new variable in the cosmos. We, the observers, the apex predators, were forced to recognize an uncomfortable reality. Humans were not just adaptive, they were catalytic. Where once we had sought to dominate, we now faced a species whose influence could reshape events far beyond expectation. They were unpredictable, brilliant, and most terrifyingly, inevitable. And in the void, as our scanners recorded their movements and our simulations faltered, we sensed it, a force that no calculation could suppress. The young engineer had ignited more than strategy, he had ignited belief. Humans responded not only to tactics, but to hope. Their courage spread, amplified by trust, and multiplied through the network of resistance that now spanned sectors. The void was silent before the storm. Our fleets, the pinnacle of technological supremacy, stretched across the sectors in ordered formation, weapons primed, algorithms optimized, calculations flawless. And yet, from the depths of Redora and surrounding sectors, the humans emerged once more, not scattered survivors, but a force that defied logic, defied probability, defied expectation. Our sensors registered every movement, every energy emission, every improvised strike, but even with every detail, our predictive models faltered. Each encounter revealed innovations we had not anticipated, adaptations that violated every rule we had encoded, resilience beyond any measure we had conceived. Small craft evaded assault through erratic yet precise maneuvers. Shields improvised mid-combat, redirecting energy with timing that matched and sometimes exceeded our calculations. They learned from every encounter, adjusting tactics in cycles we could not predict, reshaping their environment with ingenuity born from desperation and audacity alike. We began to see a pattern emerge. The apex of this species was not in their weapons, nor in their speed, nor in the scale of their armaments. Their apex was spirit, indomitable, relentless, and unbound by the deterministic frameworks we rely upon. Scarcity became innovation, chaos became order, vulnerability became strength. The young engineer, small yet monumental, orchestrated this transformation. From the front lines of the engagement, he directed humans with precision, improvising in real time, converting desperation into strategy. At the edge of our command hub, a decisive confrontation unfolded.
Our fleets, superior in every measurable aspect, faced the full weight of human ingenuity. They were outnumbered, under-equipped, yet unyielding.
One vessel, a salvage shuttle patched with welding plates and jury-rigged shields, executed a maneuver that staggered our formation, slipping through gaps in our defense we had considered impossible. Another human unit, using debris from collapsed stations, formed an improvised barricade that diverted our energy arrays, buying seconds that proved decisive. Every action, however small, carried a weight magnified by the collective effort of the species. The young engineer moved across sectors like a phantom conductor. His presence was not dictated by command alone, but by inspiration. Humans responded to him with a unity born of belief, believing not only in his strategy, but in the impossible potential within themselves. Each strike reinforced another. Each improvisation prompted a cascade of adaptive maneuvers. We watched in awe as their network of small victories coalesced into something formidable, a strategy born not of calculation, but of will. We attempted to contain them, deploying concentrated strikes, flanking maneuvers, and overwhelming firepower. Each approach was countered, circumvented, or transformed. Humans exploited every environmental feature, converting hazards into weapons, debris into shields, missteps into opportunities. The battle became chaotic, unpredictable, and mesmerizing. Algorithms could not process the sheer variability, the improvisational genius, the relentless perseverance. Every loss for the humans refined them, every victory emboldened them. We observed with growing unease as humans coordinated assaults across multiple vectors. One squadron struck the outer patrols, while another emerged from a collapsed sector, flanking our central formation. Simultaneously, smaller human crafts executed distraction maneuvers, drawing our attention away from critical targets. Their movement seemed disorganized, yet their effect was devastating. We could not anticipate where they would strike next, what innovation would emerge, or which vulnerability they would exploit. At the core of the engagement, the young engineer executed a sequence that defied all prediction. Outnumbered 3-1, his forces converged on our command hub. Shields flared, energy beams crossed in chaotic arcs, hulls buckled, and debris whirled through the void. Yet the humans pressed forward, improvising as they moved, converting every obstacle into a stepping stone. They fought with audacity and precision, exploiting gaps in our formations that we had assumed unbreachable. The battle was brutal, losses mounted on both sides. Explosions shattered platforms, energy arcs tore through sections of the station, and the void was punctuated by the glow of collapsing vessels. Yet the humans endured, adapting with every blow. Where we anticipated collapse, they innovated. Where we expected hesitation, they surged forward. Their endurance was not a matter of chance, it was deliberate, iterative, relentless.
We, the observers, the apex predators, began to recognize a truth that shook our certainty. Humans were apex not by design, but by defiance. They had rewritten the rules of engagement, not through superior firepower, but through the relentless application of will, creativity, and audacity. Every engagement forced us to recalculate dominance, to reconsider the outcome, to confront the unpredictable variable that no technology could suppress: human spirit. We observed one pivotal moment near the command hub. The young engineer's vessel, battered and flaring from energy feedback, executed a maneuver that placed him directly within the center of a multi-vector assault. Sensors predicted annihilation with absolute certainty, and yet he emerged unscathed, energy rerouted, shields improvised mid-flight, and his forces coordinated around him to exploit the resulting openings. What was meant to be a decisive strike against the humans became a turning point for them, an emblem of resilience that rippled across the fleet. We recalibrated, we adjusted formations, we deployed every countermeasure within our reach. Yet each adaptation was met with another, equally innovative, maneuver from the humans. Probability models failed, predictive algorithms collapsed under the weight of improvisation. Humans turned adversity into advantage, scarcity into strategy, chaos into coordination. They had transformed the battlefield, and with it, our understanding of dominance. The young engineer moved his forces with almost imperceptible signals, gestures, flashes, and sequences that conveyed commands far more complex than our analysis could parse. Humans acted in harmony, each improvisation reinforcing the next. Their collective cognition, amplified by trust and audacity, became greater than the sum of its parts. Observing them, we felt the disquieting recognition of something unprecedented. Humans were shaping outcomes at a scale that rivaled our fleets themselves. The engagement continued, relentless, a ballet of destruction and improvisation.
We recorded patterns of adaptation we could not interpret, sequences of tactical innovation that defied known logic. Each victory by the humans was small, fragmented, yet cumulative, and in each small triumph, we sensed the emergence of a species transcending expectation, bending chaos into form, vulnerability into strength. Finally, as the dust of combat settled near the command hub, the human forces remained unbroken. Platforms smoldered, energy arrays flickered, and vessels were damaged, but the humans endured. The young engineer's gaze swept across the sector, calm, deliberate, unwavering. They had prevailed not through annihilation, but through adaptation, perseverance, and unyielding will. And in that moment, we, the apex observers, the predators of countless worlds, recognized the magnitude of what had unfolded.
Humans were apex not because of technology, not because of size, speed, or firepower, but because they refused to be defeated. They had rewritten the rules of engagement, not through design, but through defiance. The cosmos paused. Even the void seemed to acknowledge the emergence of this species. We recalibrated, recalculated, and realized that the human apex was not a static state. It was dynamic, unpredictable, and eternal. They had survived. They had adapted. They had prevailed. And we, the watchers and the once absolute predators, understood at last that a new force had entered the galaxy, a species whose apex was spirit, whose weapon was defiance, and whose presence would alter the trajectory of the universe itself. The void was no longer silent. Across sectors, where once we had catalogued humans as insignificant and fragile, we now recorded signs of dominion, small, scattered, improvisational, yet undeniably present. The colonies that had been reduced to smoking ruins thrived once more, rebuilt with ingenuity and audacity. Platforms patched with scavenged materials became operational hubs. Shuttles once deemed useless carried supplies, coordinated strikes, and connected nodes of resistance across the galaxy. We observed, awed and unsettled, the unmistakable rhythm of a species that refused erasure. The young engineer, once merely a tactical anomaly, a curious variable in our observations, had become legend. Across sectors, humans spoke of him not only as a leader, but as a symbol, the embodiment of their persistence, their creativity, their unyielding will. He moved through sectors as a silent conductor, orchestrating survival into strategy, improvisation into coordinated action, and desperation into audacity. His influence was not limited to orders or commands. It radiated as belief, trust, and inspiration. Even those who had once fled in terror returned to fight, returning not because of coercion, but because they had witnessed possibility. We recorded every maneuver, every innovation, every small victory and monumental adaptation. Humans integrated loss into growth with a fluidity that confounded our logic. Failed structures were repurposed, casualties became lessons, fear became fuel. The mechanics of their adaptation were inscrutable, yet the results were tangible. Productivity increased, coordination sharpened, and resilience radiated across every human node we observed. It was as if the species had encoded within itself a capacity to convert vulnerability into advantage. Across sectors, previously isolated colonies synchronized operations, sharing intelligence, improvisationally, and striking at targets previously considered untouchable. Supply routes, energy hubs, and communication arrays, all once secure under our control, became contested ground. The humans were no longer merely reacting to circumstances, they were shaping them. The galaxy itself seemed to shift under the weight of their collective will.
We observed the transformation of humans from survivors to architects. Leaders emerged organically: engineers, miners, medics, individuals whose previous existence would have been unnoticed in any other context. These leaders coordinated with precision, improvising tactics and strategies that exploited environmental features, adversary weaknesses, and the unpredictable variables of battle. Each movement, each decision, carried intent that transcended the limitations of resources or probability. The young engineer, at the center of this transformation, exemplified the quintessential human trait: relentless pursuit of survival and purpose. Where others would have seen despair, he saw opportunity. Where our fleets anticipated surrender, he orchestrated resilience.
He taught his species to convert defeat into strategy, fear into focus, and scarcity into innovation. Observation confirmed a principle we could not previously quantify. Humans were apex not because of power, but because of persistence, creativity, and audacity. Their apex was dynamic, adaptive, and inexhaustible. We, the Watchers, cataloged the anomalies. Entire colonies operated as nodes in a vast network of improvisation, resistance, and adaptation. Energy fluctuations, movement patterns, and communication signals all reflected a species operating beyond predicted constraints. Their adaptation was recursive. Every victory and every setback informed the next. Even when encountering opposition far superior in technological sophistication, they improvised, adjusted, and evolved with terrifying effectiveness. Human influence extended beyond themselves. Allied species and even former adversaries observed the patterns, adapted, and in some instances mirrored human tactics. The ripple effect of human innovation reshaped entire sectors. Where once we had assumed the galaxy's parameters were dominated by measurable forces, we now recognize the emergence of a variable we could neither constrain nor predict. The humans had become an inflection point in the cosmos, a living disruption of order. And yet for all their innovation and strategy, they remained profoundly human, imperfect, vulnerable, and chaotic. Flawed structures, misfires, and near catastrophes punctuated their progress. But these flaws did not hinder them, they propelled them. Each imperfection became data, each misstep became insight, and every failure became a lesson for the collective. Their apex was not a static state of perfection. It was dynamic, emergent, and unstoppable. The young engineer moved through the theater of human resurgence with subtlety and precision. His gestures were minimal, yet each conveyed layers of intent and strategy. Entire fleets, scattered across sectors, responded to him as though his influence were a field, a force of nature shaping outcomes without coercion. Humans acted with coordination beyond simple communication, improvising in concert, learning from each engagement, and adapting collectively.
Their capacity for collective cognition and iterative innovation challenged every assumption we had ever held. We observed human colonies reconstructing devastated sectors at speeds that defied expectation. Energy systems once obliterated were restored through repurposed technology. Resource extraction became efficient and adaptive, with humans converting hazards into tools. Even their vessels, patched together from wreckage and salvaged components, moved with coordination and ingenuity that rivaled our advanced fleets. Their efficiency was not derived from technology alone, it was derived from will. Across the galaxy, humans became a contagion of resilience. One colony's innovation inspired another. One success propagated tactics and confidence. Fear, once a limiting factor, became a catalyst for growth. Despair became a framework for strategy. The cosmos itself appeared to take notice, pausing as humans converted limitation into advantage, scarcity into opportunity, and chaos into a network of adaptive influence. We, the observers, recorded a truth that no simulation could teach. Humans are not bound by circumstance, probability, or expectation. Their apex is not static. It evolves with each challenge, each failure, each triumph. They do not merely survive, they transform themselves and their environment with an intelligence that is intuitive, improvisational, and relentless. The young engineer became a symbol, mythologized among humans, and recognized even in observation decks as the axis of human resilience. His influence transcended individual capability, amplifying collective action across colonies, fleets, and sectors. The galaxy witnessed not only survival, but evolution accelerated by will, audacity, and determination. Even we, the apex observers, were forced to confront the implications. We had cataloged, calculated, and attempted to predict every variable, yet the humans introduced a force beyond our comprehension. Their adaptability, creativity, and audacity had redefined the balance of power. The cosmos, once indifferent, now paused to register the emergence of a species capable of reshaping destiny through sheer determination. From the void, we saw the humans standing on the precipice of their own myth. Fragile yet unbroken, flawed yet adaptive, vulnerable yet relentless, they had transformed insignificance into legend. Our fleets, once confident in absolute dominance, now recalibrated in awe and apprehension. A species we had underestimated had emerged as architects of their own destiny. The young engineer surveyed sectors with calm precision. Humans across systems mirrored his influence, coordinating, improvising, and innovating in a dynamic network of adaptation. Where once survival dictated action, now strategy, foresight, and audacity drove human progress. Every victory inspired another. Every defeat honed their instincts. Every challenge reinforced their resolve.
And we, the Watchers, the apex predators, realized the scale of the transformation. Humans were no longer prey, no longer marginal variables in our calculations. They were catalysts, architects, and innovators,
forces that reshaped outcomes and defied expectation. We cataloged, we observed, and we recalibrated, but no algorithm could contain them, no probability model could predict their ascent. The universe, in its infinite expanse, paused. For the first time, a species once deemed insignificant had demonstrated that apex was not granted by technology, strength, or scale, but earned through will, ingenuity, and defiance. Humans had emerged from obscurity into legend.